Hear ye, hear ye, hear ye. Let's bring the board meeting to order. June 26, 2023. And we'll start with roll call.
Washburn.
Here.
Bhatia.
Here.
Doxey.
Here.
Clausen.
Here.
DeGroot.
He's here. And it should be noted that Trustee Hewitt and Trustee Anastasio are excused. So now we have presentation. Excuse me, let's do Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, so we are visited by Baker Tilly, and that's a draft 2022 audit report.
Yes, we have Wendy Unger here tonight. As you can see from the documents placed in front of you, Wendy Unger is our auditor. She is a partner and CPA with Baker Tilly. Wendy, welcome back.
Welcome, Wendy.
Thank you. Thank you for having me here tonight. So in front of you, you should have two documents. One is a couple-page handout, which is a summary of the draft financial statements and also the draft of the reporting and insights document, which I believe you also have before you this evening. I'm going to go through both of those documents at a relatively high level. Please feel free to ask any questions you have as I go through the presentation. I'll do my best to answer those as we proceed. On the first page of the handout, I have highlighted the audit results. The objective of the audit is to issue an opinion. We plan to issue a clean, unmodified opinion. That's the highest level of assurance that you can obtain from us as your auditors. That clean, unmodified opinion means that the information contained within the financial statements is believed to be materially accurate. All disclosures that are required to be included under the standards have been included within your footnotes. That accounting principles have been consistently applied from year to year, meaning there were no new governmental accounting standards or GASBs that were effective for the village for 2022, and that generally accepted accounting principles have been adhered to. I will note in the past you did hear about a governmental accounting standard or a GASB 87. That was the accounting for leases. We did work through the evaluation of that with the village and determined it to be immaterial based on the types of leases that you had. So we did evaluate it. You did not have to implement due to the material or immaterial nature of that. And at the end of the presentation, we will talk about a new standard that will be effective for 23. So switching then to the next page of the handout, this is where I've included some very high-level financial information. The very first column there is your general fund. This is your day-to-day operating fund of the village. When we look at the information that's contained here, this is actual data, but when we look at your general fund, we often compare that to budget. So the general fund had almost $24.9 million of actual revenue. That compares to a $23.6 million budget. So very favorable results within your general fund. Your revenues came in over budget by almost $1.3 million. A couple reasons for that. Your transportation aid, when compared to budget, came in about $209,000 more than anticipated. Ambulance fees also over budget by $200,000, and then you had some additional revenues that were over budget by $623,000. On the expense side, when we look at that, we also compare that to budget. Add $23.7 million of actual to a $23.6 million budget. So you're a little bit over on the expense side by approximately $125,000. A couple of items to note there. When you look at the various reasons for that, you have your general government category, which is really more of the day-to-day operations. That's your admin, your finance, your clerk, treasurer, the board expenses. That category in total came in $191,000 under budget. So again, a favorable variance there. Nothing that stuck out as a significant contributor to that. There were numerous items that ultimately got to that category being under budget. Public safety came in over budget by $362,000. Most of that, almost all of that is within the fire department, within the overtime category. And then Public Works came in under budget by $111,000, and again, there was many fluctuations, but some of the larger contributing factors were salt and sand costs, street lighting costs, all of those came in under budget. So overall, when you put together your budget and ultimately amended it for 2022, the village had budgeted to utilize roughly $25,000 of fund balance. So essentially, with those larger figures, a break-even year. Overall, the village added $1.1 million to its fund balance within your general fund and ended the year at $10.3 million of fund balance. You'll note, based on that table, there's two pieces to that. A portion is referred to as non-spendable. That's a very small portion, $30,000. Those are prepaids. Those are items you paid in December that are really 2023 expenses. So the cash is gone, but you don't recognize them as an expense until the subsequent year. The remaining balance, the $10,274,000, is unassigned. That's working capital contingency type monies, represents roughly 43% of your operating budget, allows you some flexibility in doing one-time type projects or being able to use some cash on hand prior to borrowing. The next column is your debt service fund. So this is a fund you levy a tax and you pay principal and interest on village debt. $15.6 million of revenue. Roughly 3.2 of that is taxes. A good chunk of that, almost $12 million, are monies that come in from your TIF funds. So they transfer money in, and then the debt service fund makes the debt payments on your debt related to that. And as you would expect, TIF 5 is your largest contributor to that, $12 million. You paid $15.5 million, ended the year at almost $1.4 million of fund balance, and those monies are restricted. They can only be used for debt service purposes until the debt of the village would be paid in full. The next column I've presented is your TID 5. $39 million of revenue, very large figure. A good portion of that, $26.7 million, was borrowed money. You did borrow during 2022. The remaining portion, roughly $9.9 million, is tax increment, so the increment that's being generated from the development. That fund spent $27 million, and that was mainly on your various water and sewer projects, and we'll see in a moment when we talk about the sewer that a portion of that is contributed over to the sewer utility. And then in that $27 million is roughly $9.8 million that goes over to your debt service fund. So overall, you added $12.4 million to fund balance, ended the year at $31 million of fund balance, and of that $31 million, roughly $20 million is unspent borrowed money. So you borrowed in 2022, you didn't spend it all. So a good portion of that large fund balance is the borrowed money you have yet to spend. The last column on this page is titled non-major governmental funds. So this is all the remaining funds of the village except for sewer. So in your audited statements, when you get the final version, you will see in the very back, you will have 3 pages of more funds. There's roughly 25 additional funds, various funds of the village. This is where your remaining TIF funds, the other 5, are included. So when we look at these in total, $22.9 million of revenue. Roughly half of that is taxes that went into the various funds or were related to the TIF increment, tax increment within the TIF funds. $4.47 million was borrowed during the year within those funds. Those funds in total had almost $21 million of expenditures, and then ultimately added approximately $2 million to fund balance, ending the year at $20.7 million of fund balance. Just a couple items to note: the $12.8 million of restricted. A good portion of that, 5.2 of that, is again TIF related. TIF funds are always restricted for TIF purposes, so those are monies only available for the TIF. And then ultimately 4.9 of that are water connection fund balance that's included within your water connection fund. When we turn then to the next page, this is where I have presented the last fund of the village. This is the village's sewer utility. You'll note when we talk about the sewer utility, we talk about this in comparison to the prior year. Overall, 3 rows up from the bottom of that table, you'll note you added $10.1 million to net position. One thing to keep in mind when we talk about the sewer utility, net position is not fund balance. Fund balance is a very different calculation where net position includes all of your capital asset, all of your infrastructure. So again, a very different type scenario. But when we look at this and you look at the 10 million that was added to net position, this compares to roughly a $19 million addition in the previous year. The main reason for the difference in the addition is related to that line that's called capital contributions. That capital contribution figure this year was 10.1 million. Last year that was almost 19 million. And that again is just based on activity that happens within the village when the work is done and when those assets are contributed over to the utility. These are activity that happens within your TIF 5 and then ultimately is turned over to the sewer utility and they record the asset for it with an offsetting revenue. The remaining activity of the utility was relatively consistent with previous year. Your charges, your operating revenues, your charges to customer, very consistent with the previous year. Expenses saw a slight increase over the previous year, but overall relatively consistent. The only other item I would note is within that investment income row. That is ultimately a loss. That is not income, and you did have a small amount of income in the previous year. And again, that will fluctuate based on investments in market. So at the end of 2022, the sewer utility ended the year at $120 million of net position. Of that, 17.8 million of cash as of the end of the year. Most of that is unrestricted, so available for spending at the village's discretion. A small portion, roughly 500,000, is restricted for equipment replacement, which is a DNR requirement. So again, very large cash position there. The only other item I will note from the standpoint of the sewer utility is holding your unspent ARPA money. If you remember, you got 1.4 million in 21, you got 1.4 million in 2022. This fund has that on its balance sheet. When that is spent, that will flow down into revenue and get recognized at that point in time. So this doesn't reflect that activity because it is on your balance sheet, but I just wanted to remind you of that. One other item to note, when the village does spend that, whether in 23 or 24, depending how that splits, you will probably be required to have a federal compliance audit. When you expend over 750,000 of federal money, you are required to have a federal compliance audit. So we'll work with management to make sure the village is in compliance with that requirement when and if that is applicable. On the very last page of the highlights is the required communication. That's the other document that you have before you this evening. We utilize that for a couple different purposes. We use that to communicate comments or recommendations that may come up as part of the audit process. We need to have some standard and customary communication. That is also included in there. Just a couple items to highlight. We do identify material weaknesses. This is when we look at the internal controls of organizations and note material weaknesses within your internal control structure. Just a couple items to note, and I will say that these are not unusual or unexpected for most organizations, such as the village. I have many clients, and most of them have these type of material weaknesses because the cost benefit of addressing them is just not there. So segregation of duties, account reconciliations. This just refers to the same person reconciling account that has their hands in the day-to-day activity. So you don't have a complete segregation. Subsidiary ledgers for balance sheet accounts. This is just referring to making sure that the village has support for the various activities and the balances that are in the various balance sheet accounts. And both of these were applicable in the previous year. The last one is the financial statement preparation. For a very brief time, we become part of your internal control structure because we do prepare your audited financial statements, and we did have some material audit adjustments as part of the audit process. Those material adjustments are highlighted in the back of that document for your reference. The only other item I will note from that document is, as I mentioned when I began, there will be a new governmental accounting standard effective for the village for 2023 for all governmental entities, and that will be GASB 96, so we did skip a few. But GASB 96 is very similar to the lease standard, but it is the accounting for subscription-based IT arrangements. And as exciting of a term as that may be, the accounting for that and leases is very similar. So I have already started some conversations with management and are already sharing some information to track that activity. So the village will be prepared to implement as necessary. Again, we will evaluate that for materiality and such as we move towards the audit process. In conclusion, on the very last page, I have included my direct line, my email address. I am happy to speak with any of you regarding the documents, the information I shared, or our audit process at any point in time. So please feel free to reach out, but I'd also be happy to answer any questions you may have currently.
I do have a question. How do the communities handle this segregation of duties, which is the account reconciliation? Because you make an extra point, excellent point that it's the same person, because normally you have a head of the finance department, and everything falls under him or her. So how do they handle that? Do they have a separate person or responsible who doesn't work for that head of the department?
No. Well, first of all, most communities don't address it. Again, the cost benefit of having enough individuals on staff or involved in the process is just not there. That's just something that you need to have a little bit more skepticism as you're looking at data, but I would say most of them do not. Those that do or are very insistent on addressing it, they will bring additional individuals into the mix. So, for example, they may even go as far as bringing a board member in, maybe somebody on their finance committee if they have such a committee, bringing somebody in that is not part of that day-to-day to help address that. But really, it's just looking at the team. Another thing, what you can often attempt to do is reshuffle duties to try to segregate the best you can, but where you run into an issue is somebody goes on vacation. Well, then you're right back to where you were before because the previous person needs to step in. So it is a very hard item to address without investing significant resources.
Thank you.
Anybody else? I don't have any questions, but thank you very much.
Thank you. Have a great evening.
Thank you.
Material.
Okay, so here we're going to move on to public comment. Members of the public are welcome to provide comments on any matter. Please fill out a comment form, and the president will recognize you. Please use the microphone and state your name and address for the record. Comments are limited to 3 minutes. So can we hear from Ned Lashley?
Good evening. My address is W4181 White Swan Lane, Red Granite, Wisconsin. And I'm here this evening just to share an occurrence that happened to me a year after the announcement of Foxconn coming to our community. And about a year later, I received a notice that they were going to change the way they routed the highway that initially was going to be cutting through our property, which is on the corner of KR and 90th Street. And it was a forum, open forum to the public held in Kenosha County. And I was pleasantly surprised, to be honest with you. I mean, that property is valuable, and I understand why you wanted to change it. So I go to, I think it was a junior high school or a high school where this forum was, and I went to the table that Attorney Markowitz, representing this county. I walked up and I introduced myself. I told him I'm Ned Lashley. Immediately, he leans over his table, looks me in the eye and says, I know who you are. You're my adversary. Totally uncalled for. In a public hearing, doesn't make any sense to me. And it's bothered me every single day almost since then. You know, to be one of 120 property owners and to be treated the way they have been over these years is just puzzling to me. I'm enthused about all these companies that are coming in now, Microsoft being one of the most recent ones, and I'm happy for the community. But what happened to the 120 property owners to make that happen, there's totally unjustified. And that's my piece. I thank you for your time, but it's a terrible situation that I'm in right now. Thank you. Oh, you have any questions? I'll be glad to try to help you if you have any questions.
No, thank you, Mr. Lashley.
Thank you.
I have Bernard and Maria. This is the public comment period, but I think that you're here for one of the public hearings regarding, what is it, Racine Street? Yeah.
Rezoning?
The rezoning? And I'll call you up at that time when we get to it, okay? Because, then you can be on the record for that particular issue. Okay? So I just don't want you thinking I'm forgetting you. But we'll move on from public comment because I see nobody else out there for public comment, and I have no paperwork from anybody either. So we'll move on from public comment, and we'll move to the consent agenda.
Mr. President, I'd like to make a motion to adopt the items in the consent agenda with the exception of Extapon's liquor license, including in item number 5 for unpaid property taxes.
Second.
So I hear a motion and a second. Is the clerk okay how that's noted?
Yes.
Okay. Then I'll call the question on that. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? So that motion carries with that exception noted. So let's move on to new business. We've got a public hearing regarding 9727 Braun Road, Comprehensive Plan Amendment Application CPA 23-1. So the following rules apply to this public hearing and each of the following public hearings scheduled for tonight. If you wish to speak, fill out a public hearing form, which you'll find on the table near the entrance. Once recognized, speakers should come to the podium and identify themselves with their name and address. Please speak clearly into the microphone. Speakers must direct all discussions towards the board. I will not allow interchange between members of the audience and the speaker. Please do not interfere with nor interject comments while another person has the floor. Please keep all comments on a particular item before the board and no longer than 5 minutes. And finally, please turn off or mute all electronic devices. Mr. Schultz.
Mr. President, members of the board, the applicant applied to amend the village as part of the transportation element of the multi-jurisdictional comprehensive plan for Racine County 2035 for a proposed roadway extension from 98th Street and Sturtevant southwards past Braun Road to County Line Road. The applicant wishes to remove the proposed extension of the roadway between Braun Road and County Trunk Highway KR to support the Microsoft Data Center project. This went before the Plan Commission and was referred to a public hearing, so they have seen it once. After tonight's public hearing, it will be referred back to the Plan Commission for formal action in July, and if the Plan Commission approves it, this is an application for which they have a formal approval denial authority, then it would be back in front of the village board by the end of July. The staff have taken a look at the proposed amendment and believe it is consistent with the goals, objectives, and policies of the comprehensive plan. Generally, looking at the preservation of environmental resources, this is adjacent to and runs across both floodplains, wetlands, and an environmental corridor. So removing this extension would allow us to better preserve those areas in coordination with Microsoft. Additionally, as part of the large Foxconn related roadway improvement projects that we did with both Racine County and the Department of Transportation, the roadways adjacent to the site, including 90th Street, KR, and Braun Road, were all improved. So the extension of this roadway through the site does not serve a purpose, and the adjacent roadways through the boundary of the site are of adequate size to take all the traffic. Microsoft did complete a traffic impact analysis looking at this current staging that they're proposing and potential future staging or future phases of their project, and the roadways as they are shown are more than adequate to serve any of their employee traffic out there. So with that, we're comfortable recommending approval of this. Again, 2 more steps in the process, but so far so good. I can answer any technical questions you may have.
I don't have any particular questions. Is there anything Claude wanted to add since this is TID 5 stuff?
No, again, when Sam and I came across this with Microsoft, and obviously the other point of it is KR is now where the railroad tracks is an overpass. It's not at grade anymore. So there's really no way this road could go through today. So that would be the only other point I'd like to bring up. Other than that, it makes total sense to vacate it and remove it.
Yeah, I mean, Mr. President, I think what we learn in neighborhood plans is that, and comprehensive plans is, when you have a big area like TID 5, as the site plans come in and time changes things, these are exactly what plan amendments are for. So obviously, their site plan, their TIA, the traffic counts were very, very reasonable and so forth. So yes, the Plan Commission, we were very much in favor. Had no
Okay.
problems.
Well, this, just to remind everybody,
This is
this
a
is a
hearing.
public hearing, and now's where I invite members of the public to speak on this particular item. I don't have anybody signed up to speak on this item, which would be the 925 Brown Road CPA 23-1. So, in as much as I'm opening that to the public, there being nobody here from the public, I think we can close it in pretty much the same breath. And, there's no motion or whatever at this point. So now I can open up the public hearing regarding item G, parent 1, parent B, a zoning map amendment for 2217 Racine Street, and that's amendment 23-6. Back to Mr. Schultz.
Village staff applied to amend the zoning map in coordination with the property owner from RL2 to B1. The parcel was assigned an incorrect zone when we updated the zoning code in 2020 due to the former RCH district designation. That was an old holding district that we got rid of when we updated the entire zoning code. This is, for a long time, has been a building with a ground floor business and second floor residential, and all this update does is put this in the correct zoning district. So people applying to occupy either the commercial, more likely, or the residential, when they apply for certificates of occupancy, there's nothing holding them up on the zoning side.
And how did we stumble into this issue?
We had an applicant look to apply for a business there, and we didn't really hold them up because it has legal non-conforming status, but when these things come across our door, we just try to capture them and fix them when we can.
Got it.
It complies with the comprehensive plan and everything else, which recommends mixed use for the area. So, yeah, just trying to get out of the way.
Okay. So at this point, I'll invite public comments on it. We do have two parties signed up for that. If I could hear from Bernard Campos. If you want to come up to the podium. Excuse me?
Can you
Can
interpret
you interpret
for?
for him? I can. Well, then why don't you both come up? Because you're signed up as well, right? So you're Maria? Well, she's here to speak English.
And there's no requirement to speak. You don't have to if you don't want to.
Hi, my name is Maria Ramos, and I reside at 2229 Racine Street, and this is Mr. Campos, new resident to our neighborhood. So we're pretty much, I guess, need more clarification regarding the zoning. We've heard numerous rumors in the neighborhood that it wants to become a banquet hall. So we're like, okay, well, exactly what is the purpose of, if that's the thing, to have another banquet hall when there's no parking space? It's kind of small. It was a business before, a restaurant a while back, and there was issues then, but now with this, that we hear that it's going to be a banquet hall, and he lives right next door, we're kind of concerned, having more disputes or liquor down by us. We have enough issues on that side of town, so I guess we want to get more clarification of what they want to do in that building.
Well, let's try to get out of the rumor business and do what we can to clarify. Back to Mr. Schultz.
So to be clear, this zoning map amendment is not in relation to any specific business. This just allows any type of business allowed in the B1 zoning district to operate in the building. So we're just trying to, B1 is the zoning district that we have that's basically first floor commercial, second floor residential, which is what this building is. So this isn't regards to any specific application for any type of use. We would permit any potential user to go into the building if they comply with the B1 district. A banquet hall may, depending on their business plans, but we'd have to see those specifically, and they would have to get a separate zoning certificate to operate in the business, as well as any required building permits, fire suppression permits, liquor licenses if they were going to apply to serve liquor. So this is just to clean up the zoning of the property. It's not in relation to any specific business.
Okay, I'm going to explain to him. Es nada más para, en caso de que quisieran abrir en un futuro un negocio allí, está localizar la vivienda arriba y el negocio abajo. Si acaso en un futuro dan ese permiso, tendrían que venir a sacar permisos de licencias de licor y todos los requisitos que necesitan. So, por el momento es nada más para ver que la gente, personas viven arriba, un apartamento, y si en un futuro quieren vivir abajo, abrir negocio. Okay? Okay, I guess we got our clarification.
And I think it's important, Sam, could you quickly repeat the part about the legal nonconforming status?
Oh, yes. The building has the ability, we couldn't really deny a business to operate under there because it has been, in the past, a mixed commercial residential place. So this is really just trying to clean the rules and regulations up on our end to make sure anyone who does go through the process is following the most up-to-date zoning guidelines.
Okay.
It wasn't zoned correctly in the first place, and so this is kind of a housekeeping thing on our end, so
Okay.
that so it meets the definition of what it's supposed to be. But this does not assign any specific use. There's no licensing that's been there's been no applicant yet, as far as I know. So your concerns are issues that are way further down the road.
Okay.
If you
Entonces
could
ahorita
explain
por el
that.
momento no hay licencias de nada de licor ni nada. Okay. Okay. Thank you very much.
You bet. Anybody else wishing to speak on public hearing item number 2? Don't have anybody signed up, not seeing anybody waving their hand. So I believe that we can close public comment on that, and we'll move on from there.
Mr. President, on item C, I make a motion to approve Ordinance 13-2023 as zoning map amendment for 2217 Racine Street as presented.
Second.
So I hear a motion and a second. Any further discussion amongst the board?
Well, I just wanted to add, I think a relevant point that Sam made, anybody coming in with any kind of big party ideas has to prove the ability to have parking, bathroom facilities to, so based on the building that we saw in Plan Commission, I didn't see that as a banquet hall, that was for sure. And B1 is very restrictive in terms of its uses. So hopefully it'll be good neighbors for you. That's what we would like.
Would the police chief like to weigh in on this at all? And I'm saying this only because we've had a lot of interest over the years, not that particular building, but the neighborhood, and the measures that we've taken to restrict liquor licenses and cabaret licenses and all that sort of stuff in that neighborhood because of the neighborhood concerns and comments and complaints.
Yeah, sure. As most of you know, our Capos is on Mead Street. If you look at the transition the neighborhood's had in the last, I'd say 10 years or so, maybe a little bit less, phenomenal transition, I think. And so, obviously, it is a big concern to residents when a business is looking to move into any place down there, because the great improvements that have been made, we don't want that to go backwards. We want to keep that to continue. And so I definitely see the point here and the reasons that there was concern for what might occur there. Actually, I'm glad that I got the explanation from Sam as well, because I was curious on a couple things too. But so yeah, we want to make sure the neighborhood continues to move forward and doesn't move backwards, and that's what we would like to see as well.
Anybody else? Okay, so in the matter of 2217 Racine Street, roll call, please.
Washburn?
Aye.
Bhatia?
Aye.
Doxey?
Aye.
Clausen?
Aye.
DeGroot?
Aye, motion carries.
Yes,
So I can move on.
correct.
Okay, so let's move on to Public Works. We've got discussion possible action to award the contract for Cozy Acre Sanitary Sewer Relay.
Mr. President, I'd like to make a motion to award a contract for the Cozy Acre Sanitary Sewer Relay to the low bidder, Super Excavators Incorporated, for $1,278,785,000, contingent upon reception of all easements necessary for construction.
Second.
So I hear a motion, I hear a motion and a second. Can we go to Lindsay? You have any further insight?
Well, it was nice to see that we got 5 bids, and we came in well under what the engineer's estimate was. And if you have any questions, I can certainly answer them for you.
And is this part of the project that improves the overall issue with the Cozy Acre sewer backups and whatnot?
Correct. It'll improve the capacity of the sewer in that area.
Mr. President, if I could add, yeah, this is also part of this project is sewer main relays as well as lining. And it's a huge part of solving the problem there, although we do know that one of the property owners who was definitely negatively impacted over the years found a way to solve part of that by calling a plumber and having her cleanouts cleaned. So, sometimes we get blamed for things overall in the system that really it's home maintenance, but that doesn't solve the entire problem. And the other thing that's important about this contract, as Lindsay mentioned, it was way under budget, which is awesome. And the ARPA funds that were mentioned by Wendy are going to be used for this project, are slated to be used for it.
Go ahead, Ron.
Yeah, I'd like to add to add to what Trustee Washburn said. I'm pleased to see this project on the agenda and to have the approval, and I'm pleased to see that it's going to move forward, because for the last couple of years, this area has been impacted, with the sewer problems, and I'm very pleased to see that we are able to move it forward and to alleviate that problem that the residents have faced, for at least maybe a couple of years that I'm aware of, yeah. So
By
very
the end of
pleased.
the year, it should be all set.
Maybe more, yeah.
Well, let's not delay what needs to be happening for a long time any further. So in the matter of the Cozy Acre contract, roll call, please.
Washburn?
Aye.
Bhatia?
Aye.
Doxy?
Aye.
Clausen?
Aye.
DeGroot?
Aye, motion carries. Reports. Anything from tourism?
Mr. President, I think it's a good time to report that our colleague, Trustee John Hewitt, is doing well. He underwent some health issues and surgery, but we all, I think, most of us visited him, and he is on the way, and we wish him all the best, and we want to see him back as soon as he can. But overall, he's doing pretty good.
That's good to hear. Very good to hear.
Here, here.
I do have some update from tourism. First of all, during the month of May, you know that we announced the new brand, Racine County, Visit Racine County, and that has been well received. Carrie attended the sports annual symposium in Kansas City, and she met with 13 different organizations in an attempt to get additional events here. She solidified the 49th Parallel Cup, which is coming to the Score Soccer Park in August. And the bike race we had this past week, all indications are it was a great success, and we'll be talking a little bit more about that. The State Department noted that 13% increase in the economic impact from 2021 to 2022. So we're successful.
Very good. Good to
Excellent. Thank you, Anna Marie, and I need a motion to go into closed session.
Oh, boy. Mr. President,
Take a deep breath.
I would like to make a motion to convene into closed session per Wisconsin Statute 19.85, parens 1, parens C, considering employment, promotion, compensation, or performance evaluation of data of any public employee over which the governmental body has jurisdiction or exercises responsibility, and Wisconsin Statute 19.85, parens 1, parens F, considering financial, medical, social, or personal histories or disciplinary data of specific persons, preliminary consideration of specific personnel problems, or the investigation of charges against specific persons except where paragraph B applies, which, if discussed in public, would be likely to have a substantial adverse effect upon the reputation of any person referred to in such histories or data, or involved in such problems or investigations. And Wisconsin Statute 19.85, parens 1, parens E, deliberating or negotiating the purchasing of public properties, the investing of public funds, or conducting other specified public business whenever competitive or bargaining reasons require a closed session. Specifically, discussion of personnel matter involving a South Shore Fire Department employee and potential separation terms arrived at with such employee, and discussion of an amendment to independent contractor agreement with Kapoor and Associates, Inc.
Second.
So I hear a motion and a second. Roll call, please.
Washburn?
Aye.
Bhatia?
Aye.
Doxy?
Aye.
Clausen?
Aye.
DeGroot?
Aye. The village is in closed session. Open session.
Mr. President, I'd like to make a motion to go into open session.
Second.
So I hear a motion and a second. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? So we're back in open session. We've got 2 items. On the first item, is there a motion?
Mr. President, I got 2 motions.
Let's read the first one.
Number 1, I make a motion to approve a separation agreement with the South Shore Professional Firefighters International Association of Firefighters Local 2939 AFL-CIO and Jason Kara.
Second.
So I hear a motion and a second. Roll call, please.
Washburn,
Aye.
Bhatia,
Aye.
Doxey,
Aye.
Clausen,
Aye.
DeGroot.
Aye. Motion carries. So in the second matter, is there a motion?
Mr. President, I make a motion to amend the independent contract agreement with Kapoor and Associates.
Second.
So I hear a motion in a couple of seconds. Thoughts from the trustees?
Yeah.
I think that we have a lot to be thankful for in our relationship that we've had with Claude Loyce and Kapoor. And I think there's a big reality, and the reality is without Claude, we wouldn't have Microsoft. We wouldn't have the countless hours that we don't even see, we don't need to see because we see the results. So thank you, Claude, and we look forward to the years ahead and the things additionally you have to bring.
I concur. Second it.
Mr. President, I'd like to add, I concur, and but I'd like to add that whether you are a consultant, a project manager, attorney, doctor, medical, in every professional field, the current market rate for a seasoned, experienced professional is, if you can find somebody at $200-250 an hour, you got a great deal. The rate, market rate is, and I'm saying from my personal experience, goes from $250 on the lower side to about $450 an hour. So for anyone out there who is who has comments or the concern, just do your homework, and you'll find that for a professional project management of the caliber and experience of what we have in Claude Loyce, and like we heard from my colleagues here, this village, the State 5, whether it's a Foxconn, Microsoft, and many future projects that we're going to get where we are, we wouldn't be there. And I think this contract allows us to continue to build on that, and we are getting probably very good buck for the money, you know. So, thank you for everything you do, Claude, and we appreciate that.
Well, Claude certainly has had more than his share of critics, and Ron brought up something, and just in terms of the transparency of what he's paid, and you know, the contract is with Kapoor, and you know, Claude gets whatever he gets from Kapoor, but to Ram's point, he's getting paid. You know, or the contract that we have with Kapoor is a very fair contract for professional services. In this case, project management. And I think that it's very transparent that way. The other area of transparency is, and this is something that his critics have been wrong about, is you know, the transparency in what he does and what he's doing, why he's doing it, and so forth. And the fact of the matter is 99% of what Claude does is covered under non-disclosure agreements, NDAs. Claude simply can't talk about what he's doing, particularly to the public, particularly to aggressive media, you know, that wants to spin narratives. And it's sad because when you're under non-disclosure agreements with companies, very high-rated companies that have all kinds of competitive reasons to have NDAs, it creates an information vacuum, and anybody can stumble into that vacuum and spin their own story. It just takes great discipline, not only on Claude's part, but on the village board's part, when we are the possessors of information that simply cannot be shared until it's time to share it. I too, want to tip my hat to the work that Claude has done. And make no mistake, no doubt about it, we have Microsoft come into the village because of the efforts of Claude Loyce. And to another extent, the efforts of his working partner, Jim Page at Milwaukee 7. These are big deals. They take a lot of time. There's 1,000 moving parts. The guy that has been up to the challenge and is the possessor of all kinds of institutional knowledge, really the one guy around, even from the state level, when this TID 5 thing started, 7 years ago. Claude's the guy that knows everything, and so don't want to give Claude too big of a head on this, because tomorrow morning is another day where he's got to take phone calls morning, noon, and night from not only Microsoft, but there's still other players that are interested with other non-disclosure agreements, and I can't imagine really how hard the guy works, and how unsung he has been, and how quiet he has been in going about doing his daily job. So congratulations, Claude. We're going to extend your contract for 2 years, provided that the vote goes through.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, board members. Again, it's been an honor and a privilege serving the village of Mount Pleasant. And as I told you from day one, my goal is to make sure every decision that we make, that we bring to you, is in the best interest of this village, and I think it has been to the date. It's been a bumpy road at some point in time, but we're making a lot of progress, and trust me, right now, everybody wants to be in the village of Mount Pleasant. So there's a lot more to come. Thank you very much.
Very good. Call the question.
Yeah, so on the matter of the Kapoor contract extension, roll call, please.
Washburn?
Aye.
Boccia?
Aye.
Doxy?
Aye.
Clausen?
Aye.
DeGroot?
Aye, motion carries.
What you hesitate for?
Congratulations, Claude.
Mr. President, I'd like to move to adjourn this meeting.
Second.
I hear a motion a second. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
We stand adjourned. Thank you very much.